You know, everyone, the main point that I want to get here in this entire program is the international community's mindset towards Israel and how it's setting the stage for the Battle of Armageddon. If you don't understand the prophecies, then a lot of this stuff just seems like another news story, right? Oh, that's just, it's just another war that Israel's going through, so what? The International Criminal Court, it hasn't affected me here in Dallas, Texas, so who cares, right? But man, if you understand the prophecies of the Bible and all this stuff is playing out just like the Bible says it will, then you understand we're in the end time just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ, and I've got to get myself ready and everybody that's around me. So think about the International Criminal Court trying to deny Israel's right to defend itself. I mean, beyond that, the International Criminal Court's lack of jurisdiction that's only part of the legal problem with this move against Israel. In Khan's statement on Monday, he drew a false moral equivalence between the crimes against humanity and acts of genocide that Hamas committed on October 7th, meaning the terror group's invasion of Israel and the slaughter and horrific rape, torture, and abduction of thousands of civilians and soldiers on the one hand, and the lawful acts of war that Israel has conducted against Hamas terrorist regime and its terror army in response to the invasion and commission of the atrocities. There's a big difference in what's going on here. And because I have talked to, I've got a friend of mine, he's an Israeli soldier that was called down day one and fought all the way down through Gaza. And he was telling me, and I'm trying to get him on the program here if we can get it all the times set. But he was telling me how humanitarian Israel is and what they do before they will go in. They've given up the element of surprise. Imagine if you're in wartime. The element of surprise is everything. But the Israeli army has given up the element of surprise to allow civilians to get out of the way before they would go in and attack. Now that's what's happening in Gaza all the way down through there. But on CNN and some of these other news sources, they'll say, oh no, Israel just going out there and attacking and there's been so many civilians killed and all this other stuff. They do not understand and they will not explain how humanitarian the IDF is, the Israeli Defense Forces. Going down there, they do thousands and thousands and thousands of text messages and emails and phone calls and all kinds of stuff, dropping pamphlets from the sky, warning civilians, if you're in this area, we're going to bomb this whole region right here, get out. And of course, Hamas and them are using them for human shields. But yet they're trying to lump Netanyahu and the defense minister Gallant with Hamas leaders. There's no comparison at all. Hamas is bound by its charter to commit genocide against the Jewish people worldwide and to annihilate the Jewish state. Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, his allegations against Netanyahu and Gallant and against the state of Israel more broadly are predicated on blood libels originating from the Hamas regime in Gaza. And in so acting, the International Criminal Court is providing material support for Hamas. And that is, it is providing material support for a genocidal terror group engaged in a genocidal war against the Jewish people. What Netanyahu's doing is totally different. The International Criminal Court, the prosecutor, is requesting warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant for crimes including, listen at this, causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, and including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies and deliberately targeting civilians in the conflict. That's what Khan told CNN last Monday. Well, if you look at that, and I'm hoping to get this soldier on to write all this because Israel, again, is one of the most humanitarian armies, and they've done everything they can to get civilians out before they would ever go in and hammer down on Hamas. And they are one of the most they probably are the most humanitarian army on the face of the planet. And because they'll do a lot of things. I mean, man, when we went into Pearl Harbor, did we call first and say, hey, we're coming to drop, atomic bombs on you? No, we didn't. We went right in and, took care of business, right? But Israel, they'll actually make phone calls to the building and say, and that's how much intelligence they have, believe it or not. But they go in and they do phone calls to the building and say, hey, we're fixing to drop this building. They've done knocks on the roof. They've done all kinds of stuff. And so they do that. That's what they're trying to do to get civilians out of the way. Now, beyond all of this, and I'm doing a broad scope here because I want you to see the international community, not just the International Criminal Court, but the international community as a whole. Most of the nations, a vast majority, are anti-Israel. The spokesman for the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Germany, so what happens is if the International Criminal Court were to issue these warrants, they've issued a warrant for Vladimir Putin of Russia. Well, what he does is if he goes into one of the other nations that are signed on to the Rome Statute, that they should abide by those warrants and execute the warrant and arrest him. Well, Germany, the spokesman for the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, he said that if they do issue those arrest warrants, the International Criminal Court, this German spokesman said, of course, yes, we would abide by the law and we would execute the ICC warrant arrest against Netanyahu. Think about that. So the International Criminal Court, they don't really have a way to go in there and arrest them in Israel. The United States could veto that. No, they can't go into the state, but if Netanyahu was to go to Germany, then Germany could arrest him. And because the International Criminal Court is an international court, and they're both located in The Hague, that and the International Court of Justice, but they say it's not part of the world government or the United Nations, although it still is an international court, right? So, Mr. Khan, the prosecutor for the ICC, he said that he'd also like warrants for several Hamas leaders. Well, Senator Tom Cotton, now when I told you there's good people in the United States, I mean that. There are seemingly good politicians that are pro-Israel. Senator Tom Cotton, he is a Republican from Arkansas. He said, equating Israel's democratically elected leaders with perpetrators of the worst attack on Jews since World War II shows what a farce the International Criminal Court is. That's an absolute true statement. Okay. He also said Mr. Khan's kangaroo court has no jurisdiction in Israel to pursue these anti-Semitic and political motivated charges. He said, my colleagues and I look forward to making sure neither Khan, his associates, nor their families will ever set foot again in the United States. Now, that's the kind of position that needs to be taken. And you say, but Dave, you're a Christian minister. How could you take something like that? These people are secular individuals, to my knowledge. I mean, I don't know any of them to be pastors or Christians or anything like that. Maybe Tom Cotton is, I don't know. But the fact is, there's some things you just can't put up with. I mean, if you knew there was Iranian terrorist outside the door of your church and they wanted to come in and do harm, would you not lock the doors of the church? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being Christian and being smart as well, right? So the thing is, when somebody's totally anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily would invite them over to eat. Just be honest here. I mean, we got to try to win everybody's soul, right? But would you invite a mass murderer over to your house to eat? I don't know. I mean, it's a hard question. You got to ask yourself that. Some people, You know, I might have to win them from afar. Maybe the ICC prosecutor would read an End Time magazine at some point. I don't know. But I don't think we would get along really good if we sat down to have a conversation, because I'm pro-Israel, 110%. And he's as anti-Israel as it gets. I mean, man, the guy needs a Bible study. Some of these people are just satanic. Now, Senator Cotton, he understands, you know, as Mr. Khan apparently does not, that under the international law, the ICC has no jurisdiction over signatories. He only has jurisdiction over signatories to the 1998 treaty known as the Rome Statute. Israel didn't sign that, neither did the United States. So, Mr. Khan's workaround is to declare that he is pursuing these warrants on behalf of the state of Palestine. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Stop. Throw the brakes on right there. Is there a state of Palestine? You say, but Norway and Ireland, they just recognized the state of Palestine. Does that make it a state of Palestine? Who governs that area? Because it's not a state. There never has been a state of Palestine. There was the region of Palestine, but there never was a state of Palestine. So when you hear all these things, you've got to know the truth behind all of it. You've got to know the history of these things. Some of these Palestinian protests going on in America, what are they doing? They don't understand the history at all. Certainly not the Bible, but they can't understand history. They are protesting for the Palestinians and Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. The Palestinians, they're, you know, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they were to liberate Jews from the region, liberation, but the Palestine's never been a state. In Gaza, who's ruled that area? Well, in Gaza, it's been Hamas since 2007, 2 years after the Israelis withdrew every last Jew and Jewish grave from that territory. In Judea and Samaria, it's the Palestinian Authority, which is so weak, along with the Jews, many Jewish settlers, which is so weak that it would almost certainly be overthrown by Hamas were it not for Israel's kind of quiet support. So, with all this in mind, Senator Tom Cotton and 11 other U.S. senators, they wrote to Mr. Khan, the prosecutor of the ICC, and they said that we're not going to tolerate politicized attacks by the ICC in our allies. If you move forward with the measures indicated in the report, then we're going to move to end all American support for the ICC, sanction your employees and associates, and bar you and your families from the United States. Now, Mr. Khan, now look at the mindset of this guy who was with the International Criminal Court. He fired back at them. I'm going to hold right here because I want you to hear his reply, because it's coming against the Constitution of the United States. These people are feeling emboldened nowadays that even though the United States never signed on to the Rome Statute, he thinks there's actually something he could do to us. Okay? We're going to talk about that when we get back from the break, because you need to understand this is all setting the stage for future prophetic events. All right, are you guys getting the gist behind my program today? The mindset of the International Criminal Court and the international community as a whole, world government against Israel. Setting the stage, certainly, for the Battle of Armageddon, when the world governing armies will come down to force Israel to comply to the edicts of the world governing body. That's when Ezekiel chapter 38 says that the Lord will look at that and say, the Bible says his fury will come up in his face. And he's going to fight for Israel as he did in the day of battle. And it's not going to look too pretty for the armies that have come down against Israel. So what happened here? Well, Senator Tom Cotton said, hey, if you continue on with what you're trying to do to Israel, we're never going to allow you into the United States. We're going to sanction the International Criminal Court. Well, the prosecutor, Khan, he fired back and he said, and I'm quoting, he said, when individuals threaten to retaliate against a court or court personnel, such threats, even when not acted upon, may also constitute an offense against the administration of the justice under Article 70 of the Rome Statute. So, aren't you under the impression that Americans are guaranteed the freedom of speech? At least we used to be, right? But this prosecutor Khan, he begs to differ, right? And so that's kind of what's going on with the International Criminal Court. We're watching to see how all that plays out. But I know it's all setting the stage, their mindset for the Battle of Armageddon. Another important international organization that is part of the United Nations that came out in support of Hamas and its patrons in Tehran last week. And Nawaf Salam, he is the presiding judge of the International Court of Justice. That's headquartered in The Hague. And he declared Israel must immediately halt its military offensive in Rafah. Now, you understand what's going on in Rafah. I told you that's the main holdout for the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. So, what would America do? We go into Mexico if that was a hypothetical, if they came in here and we would hammer down, right? Well, the International Court of Justice has told Israel, you must stop what you're doing. And they said, which may conflict on the Palestinian group, may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about physical destruction in whole or in part. So, Mr. Salam, he is from Lebanon. Now think about this. Lebanon, a state which is dominated by Hezbollah, and that's Tehran's most formidable terrorist proxy, and which since October 7th has been firing hundreds of missiles into northern Israel, killing and wounding Israelis and causing tens of thousands to abandon their homes. As far as the let's call it it's the International Court of Justice, I'm going to call it the ICJ. As far as they're concerned, there is no military mechanism to enforce the ruling absent a resolution by the UN Security Council. Well, that's good because the United States, which I should say it's good under a normal president, you don't know what the Biden administration is going to do, but the International Court of Justice could not go in with a military and make Israel stop what they're doing in Rafah, because the United States could veto that with our UN Security Council veto power. So, and of course, that's where the United States has opposed South Africa's ICJ actions, and they, of course, they hold this veto power. So, these developments should serve as a reminder, not that you needed one, of what the United Nations and many other international organizations have become. They're clubs of tyrants, they're terrorists, they're anti-Semites, and it is the world government that the Bible says is going to be established in the end time, and their mindset is going to be anti-Israel. They are going to come down with a world government army against Israel. It's going to be the last battle on earth. And you can see it happening. After just what's going on over the last week or two, can you see how the mindset of the United Nations or the seat of world government is setting the stage for the prophetic fulfillment in Israel? And imagine, we've got World War III coming. We got a peace agreement coming. We got the Antichrist standing in a rebuilt Jewish temple. We got the Great Tribulation, and then we've got the Battle of Armageddon coming. The stage is being set. The international community is going to be against Israel every step of the way, because Israel will not comply to their edicts. Thankfully, the United States, the Bible says, is going to stand with Israel and protect her. And so, very important, right? Now, before we get to the end of the program here, I want to make sure that you understand what's going to happen in the very near future. I want to go to the Middle East Peace Treaty, and that it marks the beginning of the final 7 years. In Daniel 9:27, it prophesies that the Antichrist is going to confirm a covenant with many for a final 7-year period. And that accord, you can see there are people in Europe right now who are very anti-Israel that are saying, we need Joseph Borrell, we need to impose a two-state solution on Israel, which would be rewarding the Palestinians for what happened with Hamas, because like Netanyahu quoted, I quoted him earlier. He said right after October 7th, they did a poll and 80% of the Palestinians supported what Hamas did. You think about that. Not all of them. And I've got Palestinians that are friends of mine. They don't support that. But a vast majority of them do. And so there's going to be a peace agreement in the near future, though. Somebody is going to trade land for peace. Israel's done it before. They're going to do it again. It's anti-Bible. I get it. And Israel will pay for it before it's over with. They're going to lose a lot of people before this thing's over with. But this accord, it's going to be a confirmation of God's covenant with Abraham that Israel would always have a homeland in the promised land. It's in Genesis 15:18. And the fulfillment of this prophecy is going to be the signing of this peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's exactly what they're trying to force Israel to do. Now, the question is, will they do it before or after World War III? I do not know the answer to that. In my opinion, they will do it after. Now, again, that's an opinion, everybody. I can't prove it scripturally. It looks like the way everything's playing out that it's going to be on the heels of that. Now, when you see the prophesied peace agreement, then you can know assuredly the final 7 years of the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ has begun. There are 5 biblical characteristics to that peace agreement. There's going to be a two-state solution created. The Jews living out in Judea, Samaria, are going to be allowed to live out there as a Jewish minority in that under Palestinian jurisdiction. The Temple Mount's going to be placed under a sharing arrangement, Revelation 11:1 and 2. The third temple is going to be, they're going to have the ability to build a third temple as a result of the peace agreement. They're going to build that in the first 3.5 years, and then Israel is going to retain control of Jerusalem all the way to the Battle of Armageddon. And so at this juncture on this, let's say a little timeline here, we got to talk about a war that's going to emanate from the Middle East region, resulting in the killing of 1/3 of the world's population. It's called the Sixth Trumpet War, because it's the sounding of the sixth trumpet, Revelation 9:13 through 18. And it's going to take place before or shortly after the peace agreement. The Bible tells us that it must take place at the latest before the final 3.5 years begins. So, folks, it could conceivably happen at any time now if it has not already begun. In the aftermath of the war, 2.7 human beings will have died, and there's going to be a cry for a global organization that can prevent war, and the cry is going to be deafening. The international community, very anti-Israel. You can see it happening in the news every day. They're going to adopt a world governing entity to eliminate the possibility of a global war ever taking place again. Right now, all the nations of the world have not fully bought into that, but they're headed straight in that direction. After World War III, they will buy into it. The nations of the world are going to surrender their sovereignty to the new world government so that it can eliminate war completely. It never has been able to, but that's what they're being sold, and they're buying it hook, line, and sinker, right? Or they will. This world government is going to be the culmination of years of planning that have already been in progress. We've been watching it happening for decades now. And it's been generally believed that there are 2 major causes for war on the earth: conflicts between nations, conflicts between religions. What's the solution in the minds of the globalist? World government and world religion. And the Bible predicts these 2 entities will be governed by a duo of the most deceitful, demonic human beings that have ever lived. It's going to be the Antichrist and his religious partner, the false prophet. So by the midway point of the final 7 years, the world government, led by the Antichrist and the world religion, they're going to be headed by the false prophet, and they're going to have control over the majority of the population of the world. So when the final 7 years begins, the Temple Mount's going to be placed under sharing arrangement between the Jews and Muslims. The Jewish people will be allowed to build their third temple. And when the temple is completed, animal sacrifices will be resumed, just as was done in the Old Testament times. The offering of these animal sacrifices, it's going to quickly escalate onto a world crisis. The animal rights activists are going to demand that the Antichrist stop this. And that's going to lead to what's called the abomination of desolation. Once we reach the middle of the final 7-year period, prophetic fulfillments are going to rapidly increase. Many events are going to happen. And that's going to lead us into, once the Antichrist stands in a rebuilt Jewish temple, proclaims to be God, causes the sacrifices to cease, that's going to be the event that starts the Great Tribulation. That's the final 3.5 years of the 7-year period. And that's when the mark of the beast is going to be doled out. That's when the 2 witnesses are going to come on the scene. At the 3.5 year mark, halfway through that final 7 years, that's when the war in heaven is going to take place. Revelation chapter 12. That's also when Satan's going to be bound to the earth. And that's when he's going to persecute Israel and the true church of Jesus Christ. At the very end of that final 7-year period, when the international community looks at Israel and says, you're going to give up Jerusalem. They're right now calling for it to be an international city, and that it should be the capital of Palestine and Israel. That's going to be left out of the peace agreement, and it's going to be an interim agreement all the way for 7 years. At the end of that, the international community is going to say, just like the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice is doing to Israel right now, you will bow down to our edicts. And Israel's going to say, oh, no, we're not. And they're going to bring a world governing army down to Israel to force them to yield Jerusalem. And that's when the Bible says they're going to come down. It's going to start in the plain of Megiddo, come down the Jordan Valley, up into the Kidron Valley. And that's when the Bible says that the Lord's fury will come up in his face, and he will come down, plant his feet upon the Mount of Olives, do away with human governments. He's going to destroy the armies that come down against Israel. And he's going to establish his kingdom here on the earth for a 1,000-year millennial reign. Folks, that's a real quick, broad overview of the final 7-year timeline, but we are staring this thing right in the face because the mindset of the international community, you can see it right now. It's against Israel. It's trying to force them by international law to bow down to their edicts. And Israel is saying, no, we will not do that. Well, there will come a time when the world governing armies will invade Israel to force them to comply. And that's going to be the final war on earth. That's when the Lord's going to come back and he's going to say, no more, I'm done with this. Humans, you've been allowed for 6,000 years to govern yourselves. No more. I'm going to govern you for the next 1,000 years. And the Bible says he'll rule them with a rod of iron. Folks, you can see the mindset of the international community pointing us straight towards the Battle of Armageddon as we speak. That's what's going on in our news every day.